Welcome to Stetson Law Live, an online, interactive, informational event for prospective students of Stetson University College of Law. Using Ustream's chat feature, you can ask questions in real time. And now, your host, Professor Bobby Flowers.
Welcome to Stetson Law Live. We are excited to be here. We are looking forward to answering as many of your questions as we can over the next hour and hopefully give you as much information as we possibly can give you on how to start out right in law school. Before we start answering some of your questions, though, I'd like you to get to know who is here in the studio with me. And so I'd like to ask Professor Podgore, could you introduce yourself to the audience and kind of tell them where you came from?
Sure. Thank you very much, Professor Flowers. I'm Ellen Podgore. I teach here at Stetson University College of Law. I've taught at a lot of different institutions, and I absolutely love it here. I teach in the first year. I teach the criminal law class. I also teach some upper-level classes like international criminal law, white-collar crime, and I may be teaching other classes in the future. But it's just, I get to see the first year students and I also get to see the upper level students. I taught as a professor for a good number of years, but I've also practiced a good number of years also. I've been a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and have also done a lot of writing throughout my time as a professor and even before being a professor.
All right. Professor Minetti, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here at Stetson?
Absolutely. Thanks, Professor Flowers. My name is Jeff Minetti, and I have the privilege of directing our academic success program here at Stetson. And what that means is I get to work with students entering law school to help them transition into our curriculum. And then as students make their way through the JD curriculum, if they struggle or have concerns about the progress that they're making, I work with the students along with some other folks in my office to help them achieve their personal best in law school. Now, prior to this role, I worked as a legal research and writing professor here at Stetson, and before that I practiced aviation insurance defense, a real sort of boutique setting in a firm, and before that I was working with a judge right after law school.
Did you know, Professor Minetti, that you wanted to be a lawyer all your life? I mean, was that something you had always planned to do, or how did you come to be a lawyer?
So I'm a second career law lawyer. I began as an elementary school teacher teaching 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. And as I taught those students, I realized that that's not where I wanted my career to end. I wanted additional professional development. And so I was really torn between pursuing an additional degree as an MBA or a JD, and really wasn't sure which direction to go. And I found a school like Stetson that offered me both degrees in 3 years. And so that's what I decided to do. Now, once in law school, I fell in love with the law and was privileged, to find a position where I get to marry two of my favorite interests, the law and teaching.
Very cool. How about you, Professor Podgore? Always knew you wanted to be a lawyer?
I did. I used to watch Perry Mason as a kid, and I just knew that law was where I wanted to be, so I just followed that dream.
All right. If I'm sitting back and it's April and I'm looking towards August, I've got a few months in between April and August. Professor Minetti, what should I be thinking of doing in those months between now and that first day of law school?
So a couple of things come to mind. One of the most significant ones is just to develop critical reading skills. And I know that sounds sort of non-legal in nature. Critical reading is a broad skill set that really covers a lot of different disciplines, but it's the thing that's most tested here at the College of Law. So by critical reading skills, I'm thinking about a student's ability to not just understand what a text is saying, but to really think deeply into the text and understand the author's premise in the text, be able to sort of hold that premise up and critique the premise, thinking about its strengths and weaknesses, and then taking the next step and maybe criticizing or offering counter-arguments to that author's premise. So that critical reading set is one that students should really seek to develop during these months, and that can be done through a variety of texts.
Like what?
Certainly they could be legal in nature, but they could really be as simple as editorials in your newspaper or any periodical, a blog that you're reading. As you work through the material, try to break the material into a sense of what the author's argument centrally is, and then walk through the steps I articulated earlier. In addition to that, I think the other thing that students need to get comfortable with is the ability to articulate their thoughts about what they've read. So I would encourage students to not just read and critique what they've read, but get into conversations with others about that text and share their point of view and ask questions about others' points of view, because that's the kind of conversation that the students are going to encounter when they start studying law here.
Professor Podgore, any hints of what people should be doing during these months before they start that first day of law school?
I think, to me, the most important thing is to take a vacation. There's no doubt about it, but the first year of law school can be extremely trying. It's a very difficult time because you're adjusting your methodology of thinking to something that you may not have been accustomed to before. And it also is, you're going to be doing a lot of reading, some writing, and the hours can be a little bit intense at times. So I think figuring all of that out, how you're going to work through those hours, working with your family to think about the time management, I think is something very important to do, and also to take that vacation, because during that first year of law school, it may be more difficult to take that time.
I think one of the things that I think about also is the idea of spending time with family, kind of shoring up some extra chits in your bank account for all of those months and weeks when you're not going to have time to spend with your family. But to also talk about how you can arrange things with regard to spending time with them. I will tell you, when I was in law school, my husband and I had a date night. Thursday night was date night because I didn't have any classes on Friday, which meant Thursday night we did something. Now, we were poor as church mice, so we literally had a little bowl and we wrote little pieces of paper that suggested different things we could do that didn't cost anything. And every Thursday we'd just pick one out, and that's what we would do because we couldn't afford to do anything else, and we didn't want to have to spend the whole Thursday night trying to figure out what we were doing. So that was just kind of a thing we did to make sure that we kept spending time with each other, even though I was in law school at the time. Somebody has asked us the question about books. What kind of books might be helpful to read this summer?
There is a list of books available on Stetson's Academic Success webpage, so I would encourage students to take a look at that bibliography, not only the titles and publication information about the texts, but also annotations that suggest why that text may be helpful to you specifically. I want to point out two that really rise to surface for me. One is by Michael Hunter Schwartz. It's called Expert Learning for Law Students. And what the book
his name again was?
Michael Hunter Schwartz.
Okay.
And the text is Expert Learning for Law Students. The book has nothing really to do with substantive law at all, but what it does do is teach students how to go about learning the law by introducing them to the way that the law is structured and then suggesting ways that steps students can take to get ready to learn that material. I think it's a great introductory text.
Okay.
For those students worried about writing for exams, the book that rises to the surface is Mastering the Law School Exam by Suzanne Darrow Kleinhaus. Both of those books are listed on the bibliography that I referred to, as well as several others.
All right. Professor Podgore, you teach a first-year course, criminal law. Would you suggest to students that they start learning criminal law or any of the other topics before they come to law school?
No. I really think you should wait on that. I don't think it's a good idea to try to figure out what we're going to test you on or how we're going to test you. I think you should get inspired over the summer. And reading books like Gideon's Trumpet by Anthony Lewis is a wonderful book. Jack Bass has a book, Unlikely Heroes. Anna Emanuel has a new book about a judge called Elbert Parr Tuttle. There's also Sotomayor's book. I just finished reading it, and I think it's just wonderful. You really get to see what it's like for a Supreme Court justice and what her life is like and how she went through law school and the trials and tribulations that she faced in entering into the legal community. I mean, there are many other biographies out there. Steve Wormeal has a wonderful biography on Justice Brennan. There are biographies on Cardoza and Holmes. These are the kinds of books I think that will help you get you inspired to want to learn the law.
Great idea. Well, you talked about some of the things about law school that you'll always remember. Do you have a moment in your first year that you'll always remember, Professor Minetti?
I don't have a specific moment, no. Instead, I have a series of impressions. I recall feeling incredibly overwhelmed by the quantity of information, really, really insecure. And I mentioned that I went to law school as a second career person, so I'd already been out working for 5.5 years, but when I went to school, I felt so insecure about everything I was doing. I didn't know if I was studying properly, if I was writing properly, and just the uncertainty of law school, really, I remember being a significant impression upon me, really unsure about what was expected of me during that first semester especially. So those three impressions, being overwhelmed, insecure, and uncertain, stand out to me.
All right. Professor Podgore, any memories of that first year?
I do. I have a memory. I remember sitting in my first year of law school and the professor saying, look to your right, look to your left. Somebody isn't going to be here next semester. And let me tell you, we don't do that at Stetson. At Stetson, what I say is look to your right and look to your left and make sure you get to know the students on either side of you, as well as all of your other classmates very well, so that when they get appointed to the Supreme Court, they can appoint you as the next Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Rather, when they get appointed president, they can appoint you to the Supreme Court.
Okay. It's funny, I have a memory of my first year of law school contracts. We had a professor who was an elderly gentleman who was visiting in the law school that I went to that was a little bit high in altitude as far as where the law school was. And he actually had to bring his oxygen tank to class every day because he was having trouble breathing. And in between taking oxygen in, he would, ask us questions. And he one time asked a question of me, and I raised my hand, volunteering, thinking that I had the right answer. It wasn't actually even a question directed at me, but I knew the right answer. And right after I spoke, he looked at me and he said, Miss Flowers, that is the stupidest answer I've ever heard. Now, let me tell you, it's been a lot of years since that day happened, but I still remember how I felt that day. And I want to tell you two things. I lived through it. I'm here today, even though that happened. And number two, nobody else in my class, if I went back and asked them, even remembers that day at all, remembers anything like that. We're the only ones that remember it. And probably the third thing I would say to you is that's highly unlikely to happen here at Stetson. We're not the kind of faculty that berates our students. We really do want to make you successful. We're going to be tough. Professor Podgore has a reputation for being tough, but then probably 2 or 3 weeks into it, students realize that she's actually just cares an awful lot about how well they do. So I don't think you're going to see that kind of professor, but tell me, Professor Podgore, about what kind of feeling it is in the law school class here at Stetson.
I think it's a very welcoming feeling. It's a rigorous feeling, too. We really pride ourselves on making certain that our students learn the material, that they learn the critical skills that are necessary for them to go out in the practice and be successful. There's a Stetson way, and we're very proud of it. But with all the rigor, it doesn't mean that you have to demolish a student in the classroom. There's no need for that. We can be a welcoming society. We can be somebody we appreciate each other. And I think that's very much so on the faculty, and I think it's also very much so amongst the students here. We don't have that competitive atmosphere that one sees at so many law schools.
Someone's asked a little bit about this thing called the Socratic Method. Can you explain what the Socratic Method is, and does it look like that here at Stetson? And do most law schools carry out that kind of Socratic Method in their first semester and first year of law school?
I think the idea behind the Socratic Method is to, rather than give students in almost a spoon-feeding way what the law is, how the law is structured, and why the law is structured that way, the professor uses a series of questions to help the students discover that for themselves. And I suppose it's in that form that you see the Socratic method applied here at Stetson. You're going to see a wide range of teaching styles, as Professor Podgore has already indicated. But many of us really do want the students to make discoveries for themselves about what the law says and what the law should be saying. Because as a lawyer, that's part of what you're charged with figuring out. So you'll see us, rather than standing up and lecturing straight away, engaging the class in conversation, trying to help students think a little further, a little deeper about the material. And in my mind, that's how the Socratic Method is best employed. When, as a class, I can step back from the class meeting and get a sense that the whole group really moved forward in their understanding of the material after the class is complete. I know that I've done my job. So that's what I think about with that phrase.
And I guess when I hear you say that, I think to myself, how will I take notes then? Because if the professor's just asking questions, what will I write down at the end of the day so that I can study?
Yeah, so that's a great question and a real concern with first-year students, because the class meeting is oftentimes a discussion between students and professor, and students aren't sure what they're supposed to be taking away. I think the answer comes with what you bring to class. I strongly urge students to take a very active, engaged approach to their pre-class preparation. I think they come into class with a set of notes and understanding of what the law is and why the law is shaped in that particular way. And then through class, what they're doing is adding to that information, correcting if they've gotten something wrong, and they're listening carefully to the professor's questions, because oftentimes the questions themselves give clues as to how the professor is processing what the law is all about. So sometimes just writing down the question, not even the answers, is what's really important. I think the most effective note-taking actually takes place after class. What I recommend students do is they meet either on their own or with a group of 2 or 3 others and sit and just process what took place during class. And if they can synthesize that class meeting into 4 or 5 sentences across the topics that they've covered, they probably have a sufficient note record of what took place in class.
Interesting. Now, somebody's asked the question about cold calling in class. Give us a sense of, maybe you could explain what that is in case someone's not really sure, and give us a kind of a sense of how that works.
Okay, professors throughout the curriculum use many different methods. As Professor Minetti said, some people use the Socratic. I happen to use what's known as a modified Socratic method. In other words, I'm not going to call on people and berate them, but I am going to use a question-answer discussion format. The importance of this is to bring out the materials from the students as opposed to me just telling you. If I just tell you, there's less of a likelihood you're going to remember it than if you were the ones who have to find it, because we only teach you such a small percentage of the law that the whole practice of law is dealing with finding it yourself. One of the things about cold calling is some professors will in fact call upon you without you knowing in advance that you're going to be the one called upon. Some of us go down the row. Some of us will say this group of students is responsible for the next class. It varies across the board. That's good. Why is that good? Because when you go out in the real world, every judge is different. Every court is different. And learning different styles is very important. What you may see in one courtroom may be the exact opposite of what you're going to see in another courtroom. So the more and different opportunities you have while here in law school, the better prepared you're going to be.
Speaking of being prepared, Professor Minetti talked a little bit about bringing some notes to the class. What do you expect students will do before they come to class every day?
I expect a student to have read the assignment, to have thought about the assignment, and it's usually a reading assignment. It usually will include a few cases, to have briefed the cases before they come to class. Now you'll be saying right off, what's a brief? I mean, we teach you all of that. Relax, okay? That will be things that will be covered during orientation, first few weeks in classes. I even go through in my first couple of classes what my brief might look like in that first case or two. I even, after the first section of my course, give the students my outline for that first section so that they see what an outline looks like. So many of the things that maybe, do I need to know this before I come? No. But you do need to prepare for the class. And whatever that assignment is, I can't stress how important it is to read it before class. And I agree with Professor Minetti. It's also important to look at it right after class. I strongly recommend to students that before they go to their next class to sit down for maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, look at their notes, reread the material, and just put it all back in together in light of what the discussion was in class.
Now you spoke a little bit about orientation. Professor Minetti, can you tell us a little bit about what orientation may look like? I know it will vary at different schools, and it may even vary this year from last year, but kind of what would I expect to encounter in orientation?
The way Stetson College of Law does orientation, it's typically a 2-day program. And what we're trying to do is introduce you to the physical structure of Stetson so you feel comfortable knowing where your classes are, where you're going to need to park. We also want to introduce you to the core administrators that are going to partner with you as you journey through the College of Law. In addition to that, there'll be a number of what I call academic sessions, and during those sessions, we're going to acquaint you with what the role, it's going to introduce you to the idea of what role a lawyer plays in society. We're also going to help you see what it means to be a law student and how the transformation from layperson, law student to lawyer takes place. So during orientation, we're about sort of a big picture theme setting so that as classes begin, you have a clear sense of the journey that you're embarking on. Now, we do provide some specific information as well. Students will attend a mock class, and that's typically taught by 2 Stetson professors with really different teaching styles, so that before students even attend their first class, they have a clear sense of the kind of conversation that they're likely to encounter when they sit for that first class. I think at that mock class, the students also get a sense of the expectations students have with respect to the preparation that's required. Because as part of our orientation, the students will be asked to read a few cases and a law review article to get ready for that orientation session.
And I would just suggest to you that it's really important that you understand that we do expect you to have read those things before you come to your first orientation class, because it really is about expectations, and we want you to understand and feel comfortable with this is going to be the expectation that you're going to be held to. Someone has asked the question how large 1L classes are, and if the research and writing class is a little bit smaller. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the sections of first year courses are going to vary in size a good bit. Research and writing is typically smaller, between 35 to 45 students typically in those sections, whereas the other substantive courses may have a larger section of 60 to 80 students, depending upon the population of the entering class.
Okay. Someone's asked a question about taking notes or doing notes on laptop. Professor Podgore, what's been your experience in the law school class?
I think I've seen more and more students moving to laptops. The most important thing is to use what you are comfortable with, whatever you're used to, and you may want to work on your typing skills over the summer, because a lot more students are submitting their exams typed now than in the past, and you may feel more comfortable, and if you have a faster speed and more comfortable of typing, it might be something that might be helpful. But there's no set way of taking notes. It really is what is the most comfortable for you. Some people handwrite them and then type them up afterwards. Other people take the notes directly on the computer. I have to say that there are more people taking notes on computer now than there were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And almost all of my first year exams now come in typed.
Right. I would suggest to you that one of the things you want to be thinking about, however, if you are going to use a computer to take notes, is that don't get into the habit of basically transcribing everything you're hearing. What you really want to do is be listening to what is going on in the classroom and then put that into your notes. And I think sometimes we get into the habit of just kind of acting as little transcribers and writing down everything that's said in the class, and then you don't really have the opportunity to be thinking about what you're hearing as you're taking those notes. Somebody's asked the question, how does a section size equate to a class size? And it may just be a change of language there.
Let me clarify that. So when Stetson seats a class, we're thinking in terms of the entire fall 2013 full-time class, for example. That's going to be a large group of students, and I think we're looking at about 230, 240 students in that class. But the class is divided into 3 sections. And that section size is going to range depending upon the room availability for where the class is going to meet. But it's going to be within that 60 to 80 student range that I described. Each section is further subdivided into research and writing classes. So one section may have a couple of different research and writing professors that work with it.
Right. Now, if I'm in your section, you and I are students, and I'm in your section, will I have all my classes with you, or do the sections change across the curriculum?
The sections will not change across the curriculum. The only class we may have different is going to be our research and writing course. We could have 2 different professors for that class.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think one of the nice things about that is that it's almost like you're in a small law school in and of itself, because you'll have those 60 to 80 students that will be the same students you have in all of your classes, so you get to know them very well, and get to interact with them and study with them. So that's a good thing also. Somebody's asked the question about stress. What are some things to do about stress during the first year of law school?
Lots of suggestions about stress. I think it's something that students can really begin working through now as you approach wherever you are. If you're finishing up your undergrad education, I would have you think about how you're coping and dealing with the stresses in your life currently. When you get to law school, I think what you'll find, as Professor Podgore has indicated, that you're going to have a lot less time to do the things that you maybe have enjoyed doing in the past. And for many students, that creates some stress in their lives that they're not accustomed to. So what I recommend for students as absolutely essential is that they begin their first semester with an academic planner of some kind. And that planner really needs to contain not just their academic commitments, but also their personal life commitments. Now, I'm currently using an electronic planner through my email here at Stetson, and that gives me the ability to load a lot of different things in the calendar, and then my phone, which is sunk with that, can remind me of the different things that I'm supposed to be doing. I get very precise with that planner. I don't just say I'm in class or I'm preparing for class at a certain time. I state with precision what it is I expect to do during that time. By being very clear about how I'm spending my time, I reduce some of the stress of thinking, I don't know what I need to be doing next. I've got all these things, these tasks that I'm responsible for, and I just don't know how I'm going to get them all done. By having an academic planner, I can take steps to really make sure that those things get done. I really preach a message of wellness and balance, and I think that helps deal with stress as well. I think that law students must have margin in their lives, and by that I mean that white space outside the text where you're doing things that are non-legal that you enjoy across the semester. And that may be family time, like the date night that you described a few moments ago, Professor Flowers. It may be church on Sunday mornings. If that's important to you, you need to be continuing that. Diet, exercise, sleep are also things that you need to balance across the semester so that your stress is well managed. You'll hear it said many times as you transition to law school, this is an endurance race. It is not a sprint. And if you try to sprint through the experience, you'll find that you are wearing yourself out long before the semester ends. So I am all about encouraging students to get a planner, to pace themselves, to keep that white space, protect time in their schedule, to do things that they enjoy, to provide outlets for themselves. Hopefully that's a starting point there.
Here at Stetson, we have a lot of opportunity for that. We have a well-equipped gym. We, of course, have our swimming pool. Of course, I guess not everybody has a swimming pool in a law school. And then we have a lot of intramural sports. So there's lots of opportunities to do those kind of non-law related things throughout the week. But I think it's right. It has to be from the very start, because you're going to hit the ground running. There's going to be 1,000 things right away that you need to be getting done. And you need to, again, schedule that time to relax during even the first weeks. Someone has asked the question, Professor Podgore, with 60 to 80 students, do professors really get to know their students very well?
Yes, absolutely. I have as many as 80 students in a criminal law class, and I do small lunches with them where we do brown bag lunches. They get to sign up, it's their choice. And we talk on a one-to-one. I also meet with every single one of my students in the criminal law class during the semester, and I feel like I need to know them. They need to know me. We're working through this together. I also am a faculty advisor for several law student groups, such as the Lambda group, such as the Jewish Law Students group. And these are an important part of being a faculty member here because I get to meet the students. We had just recently a whole group of students at my home for a get-together for the end of the year for one of the student groups. So yes, we do get to know the students, and I think the vast majority of the professors here are very into learning about our students. You are our future of our law school, and that's important to all of us.
I think a lot of professors here at Stetson believe that students are the best part of the job. And so we enjoy spending time with students either in our offices or in other situations. And so I think you will find that even though it feels like 60 to 80 students, how could you possibly get to know them, that we do seem to be able to get to know the vast majority of the students in our class throughout the semester. Somebody's asked a question about the part-time program. And is the part-time program a little bit different structure-wise than the full-time program? Professor Minetti?
I'm not sure what's meant by structure there. I'll tell you that the sequence of courses is broken out over 4 years instead of 3. So students are taking fewer classes at a time. And typically those are being taken in the evening. But in terms of the class itself, for example, in the fall, our part-time students typically take contract and tort. Those substantive courses are taught the same way in the part-time program that they are in the full-time program. The professor's expectations for preparation and level of knowledge and level of learning is exactly the same. And the classes are run in the same way. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I would say there.
I will tell you, my experience with the part-time program has also been that they become a very tight knit group, that they really do believe in helping each other, because obviously they're all kind of running here and there and trying to accomplish a total life, and then also law school. So they become a very close-knit group in the part-time program, and I think that that's a real advantage to the part-time program. Someone's asked the question about audio videotaping or audio taping law school classes. What's your impression on that? Should I do that, not do that? How does that work?
Right, so the College of Law has a policy that you may not do that without authorization. And the reason is because of that conversation that takes place during the course. Now, students may have disabilities that require some sort of recording of the classroom content. And that's really a separate issue. Here the question is, if I'm sitting in class, is it okay to have my recorder on my laptop? Or if I have a pen that does that, can I turn that on? And the answer is really no. There may be extreme circumstances, but I would say without authorization from the administration, that's not something that can be done. I understand the intent behind the question is to want to preserve somehow what's happening in class, and I think the best way to preserve it is simply to be engaged. If you're actively engaged in the class discussion, listening and thinking and offering contributions to the class, you're going to remember exactly what you need to from class, much more than you would if you tried to actually audio record the events that take place there.
And of course, as two criminal law attorneys here, we would tell you that tape recording somebody without their permission is a felony offense in Florida. So just throw that out there, just in case you were wondering about that situation. Somebody's asked a question about what about living 20 minutes away from campus? Is that going to be a real disadvantage to me if I live 20 minutes away from campus? Professor Podgorn, what do you think?
Absolutely not. I think people live all over the place. We have students who live 2 hours from the campus. We have students who live on the campus. I mean, there's a wide variety here. 20 minutes is not going to be a disadvantage at all. I mean, you're very close, and the traffic here is not overwhelming. Maybe if you're crossing the bridge occasionally to Tampa, but we don't have the traffic issues you find in so many cities.
Right.
So I don't think it's a disadvantage at all.
I will tell you that when I was in law school many years ago and we had to take our horse and buggy to law school every day, I lived about an hour away. And what I would suggest to you that if you do live away from campus, you want to really kind of organize your life so that when you come here, you are here and you study in between classes. You really utilize your time when you are here, as opposed to some students who live close to campus, will go back and forth and, not really maybe organize their lives as well as you might because you live farther away from campus. Because you might, in fact, say, okay, I'm going to use this as an 8 to 5 job, and I'm going to study in between classes, and I'm going to, use all of my time effectively while I'm away from home and here at campus. So I think it can be used for an advantage, and I don't really see a big disadvantage.
You could also use it for getting tapes. There are many companies that have tapes about the different courses, and it may be like a study guide or something that you want to listen to while you're on the road. Make good use of the time, or you may want to take that as your break time. Listen to some good music.
Yes. Part-time student orientation. Is there a part-time student orientation? Is it the same sort of thing? Are there usually one section of the part-time program or two sections of the part-time program?
Yes, so with orientation for the part-time students, there's a separate orientation for that population. It typically takes place on the weekends when part-time folks are not working and able to attend orientation. There is just one part-time section. When that group of students moves into the research and writing curriculum, it'll be divided into two groups. They'll have two separate professors.
Someone has asked the question with regard to exams. So let's fast forward from the summer before law school all the way to exams. Can you tell us a little bit about law school exams, and are they really as different as the exams I took in undergraduate?
I would say they're exceedingly different. Maybe depending upon the undergraduate program that you've been participating in, but I think they're exceedingly different because here you're going to find that you're exposed to a lot of information, but you're not tested on the crystallized knowledge of that information. You're tested on your ability to actually use, to employ that information. So what you're learning is the ability to think and process information. I oftentimes still tell students that this is not really a law school so much as it is a fact school, because what you learn to do is appreciate the legal significance of facts. And that requires, of course, an understanding of the law. So what does all that mean in terms of an exam? What you're likely to expect is a story on the exam, a fact pattern we'll call it, that includes a number of events, number of parties that take place over a set time. Some professors are quite creative with their stories, and you'll be asked to assess the legal significance of that story. Could one party sue another? That sort of thing. Your response needs to be an analytic response, a response that explains to the reader in a real syllogistic format what the law is that's applicable and how that law applies to whatever the facts of the fact pattern is. And I guess that's what makes the law school exam so different from other undergraduate exams, because you have to be able to know how to use the law and explain how to use the law. Very often, undergraduates come to us almost racing through a thought process to get to the right answer. And the right answer is the one that scores the grade or earns the points. But in law school, the right answer is the analysis, not the conclusion. It's that thought process of explaining the law in an incremental way and then applying that law to fact in a likewise incremental way.
Professor Podgore, what's your thoughts on exams, first-year exams?
I think you'll find that just like every court is different and every judge is different, every professor's exam can be very different. I think Professor Minetti is right that the regurgitation of material is less important. What really is important is the analysis and not the conclusion, how you get there, and what arguments you make on either side. We may not just want one side. We want both sides. We want to hear the full picture of what it is that you're analyzing and the process that you're using to analyze it. So it is very different than the undergraduate school, but it's also different in different classes here. There may be some classes where it's an exam that may have some multiple choice in it. There may be some that's an essay, some that's a short answer, some that will ask you not for the conclusion, but ask you for 4 different reasons of how you might get there. And there are some that will ask you to write a paper. So there are many different methodologies that are used for exam taking, and again, it's just like in the courtrooms. One judge will want one thing and a different judge will want something very different.
So how am I going to know what my professor wants? I mean, if they're all different, how am I going to know who I'm writing an exam for?
And I think that is so important to learn. It's the same process of learning a judge. I think one of the things you want to do is you want to figure out what that judge wants when you walk into a courtroom. And that's something we're teaching you here at law school. We're teaching you how to reason what that professor is going to want. The way I do it is I give a practice midterm. It doesn't count. And that practice midterm gives the student the opportunity to then meet with me afterwards, figure out what I liked, what I didn't like, see what I think might be in a good answer, and then try to develop themselves so that they can produce that for the final. Now, I have to tell you, people always say, well, why can't you give me a model answer? Because there is no right answer. And I have seen students take the exact opposite position on an essay question, and both of them get top grades, because it's not the answer, it's how you get there. And you can get there in many different ways and still be getting a top grade.
Now, you indicated that you do a midterm, but that it's not graded. So what is my grade going to be based on in law school?
In many classes, the assessment we use is the final exam. Now, some professors do use a midterm, and they might count the midterm. In the legal writing classes, it's a progression of several different projects that get counted toward the grade. So it can be, again, like the different courtrooms. Each judge is going to be different here. In the upper level classes, it may be partly class participation. It may be other different assessment tools that might be used. One of the things that's very different about law school than undergraduate school is that most of our final exams we grade anonymously. And that, I think, is something very different than what you might have been exposed to in the undergraduate institutions. I have no idea when I grade a student's final exam who the student is who wrote that final exam. They have a number. I don't know what that number is, and that student number is what they put on their exam. I grade them all, I turn them into the registrar, and I don't find out afterwards how my students did. And the anonymous grading methodology has a lot of advantages to it.
Jeff, or Professor Minetti, how do I figure out if they're not going to give me a practice exam? How am I going to figure out what the professor wants on that one exam that's my whole grade is going to be resting on?
That's a great question and a real concern for many students. So earlier, when I described how to take notes in a law school classroom, I mentioned to listen for the professor's questions. The questions asked in class often are similar to the questions asked on exams. So there's a number of different kinds of questions that can be asked. For example, a question may be about a factual analysis. Given these facts, how would the law apply? If we change this fact, now how does the law apply? That suggests that you may find on that exam an issue spotting fact law analysis type exam. Other professors emphasize policy, and what they're more concerned with is the way that the law is structured and the forces in society that have structured it that way. And from those professors, you'll hear during class the kinds of questions that are more policy and interdisciplinary in nature. You can expect those professors to ask questions that are similar to that on exams. So I would say listen to the professor's questions. Listen to the positive feedback he provides when students are responding in ways that are effective responses to those questions. And from there, you'll get a sense of what to expect on that professor's exam.
I think the other thing that students have to always remember is that if a professor offers you the opportunity to speak to them, you want to take every opportunity you can. And even if they don't, I have students that will say, would you look at a practice question for me? Of course I will. That would be great for me, because then I know that I'm going to help you do better on the exam. So you want to take the opportunities that are given to you, but if you have a sense that you're concerned a little bit about how am I going to do, go see that professor and talk to them, and I would guarantee you here at Stetson at least, you're going to be given the opportunity to work with that professor. Professor Minetti, you talked earlier about the fact that you also deal with students that are struggling. Can you tell us a little bit about what your department does for helping students get ready for their exams?
So we do a number of things first semester. As I mentioned, we begin with a 2-day orientation that exposes you to some of the expectations that you'll have during your classes. We also provide a series of academic success workshops that any student that can attend, and you can learn more about the skills associated with case briefing, formulating an outline, responding to essay and multiple choice questions. In addition,
do we have that webpage up here?
We have the webpage up there. If you could show, the Keys to Law School Success. That shows a number of the resources available in the program. If you'll just search at the internet, on the intranet site for Stetson for academic success, you'll find this as well. And in addition to the academic success workshops I described, we also have a variety of resources available on the webpage for students to watch at their convenience. Again, the topics are those that first semester students are concerned with. I mentioned syllogisms, for example. If that's not a concept you're familiar with, there's a video presentation on what syllogisms are and how important they are to writing an effective exam answer. Now, after students' first semester, if you do happen to struggle or if you're just displeased with your exam results, our Academic Success Department is at your disposal. We provide all kinds of resources for students, from reviewing outlines and case briefs, an example, and essay responses, to actually helping the students understand, debrief from an exam review that they had with their professor. In addition to all of that, myself and my colleague, Professor Tisha Dunham, teach courses in the upper level that are infused with academic success skills. I teach a remedies course during students' second year that really helps them get, I'd say refine their academic success skills. And then I teach a trust and estates course that helps students prepare for the way that the bar exam is going to test. So we've got a program in place that really seeks to partner with you from admissions and orientation through graduation and being successful in that bar exam.
You indicated that there are some things that students can do. What are some bad practices? What are some things that students do, maybe even from the first couple of weeks, that are going to inhibit them achieving their goals in law school?
I would sort them into two groups, and Professor Podgore may have one. They're the students that really simply don't try hard enough. You'll find that in a group of 60 to 80 students, it's not too difficult to be invisible and not really be directly accountable for the work that you were supposed to have prepared for class that day. Those that do not try hard enough, that really don't actively engage in class, even though no one's forcing them to do so, oftentimes find themselves in a difficult position with exams. I think the second group is really those that try too hard. These are the folks that almost over-prepare for class, that are so very engaged in class and so committed to law school with every waking moment of their lives. By November of their fall semester, they're exhausted and they're done, and they're not able to complete the race, and that is finish their final exams. So I think if I'm a student, those are the pitfalls that I would be wary of, both taking it too easy, not really putting my personal best into each task I undertake, and then being careful not to push too hard, but pacing myself as I run through it.
Professor Podgore, what do you see as worst practices for law students, especially that first semester?
The two worst practices that I see are, one, not coming to class.
Absolutely.
I can't stress how important it is to come to class at law school. This is not something you can cut out. You've got to be there. You've got to be in attendance, because just reading the material doesn't put it all together. You need to know what that professor wants, what that judge is going to look at for that final exam, and what's important to learn the study of law. The second practice is not reading the material before class. It is so important to come in prepared, because you're not going to understand what they're highlighting. You're not going to get the nuances of all the questions they're asking unless you have come in prepared and read all the material. Those are the two worst things. And the third thing I would mention, not as a worst thing, but is if you have a problem, go see the professor. We have open doors. We're interested in talking to you. Don't be afraid to come and talk to your professors here. They want to speak with you. They want to know if you don't understand something. If I have 2 or 3 students come to me and they don't understand something, it means that maybe I need to explain it to the class a little bit better. So don't hesitate to do those things.
Someone has asked the question, when will they start to receive their packets for orientation and of those students that have already enrolled? Any idea when they should be seeing that information coming to them, Professor Minetti?
That information is typically posted in June, and what I think would be best is for Laura Zeppo in her office can probably answer best precisely when in June that is. I shoot for a June 1 deadline for having the materials that I want students to read and prepare for orientation to be posted on our webpage so students can access that information. as the summer progresses, I actually release additional information that I'd like students to think about prior to orientation. And this information is more optional. It's designed just to provide additional support for students prior to the beginning of classes.
All right. If I'm concerned about maybe there's an issue, a disability that I have, how is that addressed in law school?
I have the privilege of also serving as the College of Law's ADA coordinator. So if you're a student with a disability that the American with Disabilities Act recognizes, I'm the person that's going to help you coordinate accommodations that you may be entitled to. We have, I think, a very well-defined Disability Services webpage, and guys, if you could put that up on the screen for us. This is a page that you can access by simply searching for disability services, and on this page you will find all the documents that you will need to provide to my office to request accommodations. If you're a disabled student, I strongly encourage you to do that sooner than later. We have a series of non-exam accommodations that students frequently request, and the sooner you can make that request to my office, the sooner we can ensure that that accommodation is in place for you. So you'll find that some of our deadlines are very early in the semester, and I'm saying by the second week of courses. If you're going to seek note-taking assistance, for example, you need to have supplied to my office that request and the medical documentation that supports it. Along the way, in addition to providing accommodations, I also like to partner with students and just discuss with them what it's going to mean to study law over the long haul with the disability that the student's working with, and also what it's going to mean to take a bar exam and practice law with that disability. It's a completely different arena that requires some education, frankly, and I would love to partner with folks that are processing through that very early in their career so they get the information they need to be successful.
Somebody's asked some questions about what activities. We have so many activities here on the Stetson campus. What are some activities that they can be involved in their first semester? Not a lot. And their second semester, and then going on from there.
As you've indicated, Professor Flowers, there are a wide range, and I don't even know the number, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have 50 different student organizations on campus. Professor Podgore mentioned her involvement in a few, and I would say even during a student's first semester, I think quality over quantity. I would expose yourself to the other folks on this campus, and frankly, we admitted you hoping that you would. This isn't just about us delivering a legal education to you. This is about you contributing back to us. We admitted you because we think that you have something special to bring to our campus, and student organizations are one place where that can really be expressed. So I would encourage you, maybe even during the first semester, to think about an organization or two, not a bunch, that you really want to get involved with. And then as you progress into the second semester and into the upper level curriculum, find an organization or two that you can contribute to in a meaningful way. Seek out leadership positions. I know in law school, one of the things that I did was get involved with our law school's law review, and I had the opportunity to serve as editor-in-chief of that review. And that experience really nicely framed my law school experience. It gave me a chance to develop some leadership skills that honestly I still draw upon today in my role as Director of Academic Success here at Stetson. So I would say to you, there's a parallel curriculum. There's the 88 credits that you'll take to graduate, and then there's a whole sea of other great information, this parallel curriculum that you need to avail yourself of while you're here at Stetson.
Professor Podgore, we talk a lot about trial advocacy, litigation, oral advocacy skills here at Stetson. Anything that students can do their first couple of semesters with regard to those sorts of opportunities?
Absolutely. I mean, you cannot be on the trial team or the moot court team or the ADR team in your first year. We don't allow that. I mean, we sort of are protective in that regard. But that doesn't mean you can't be involved with the teams. We have what's known as shadow teams, which means that a student can prepare the case and help out a team that's going to a competition by actually trying the case against them. We also have various competitions during the first year in advocacy. We have a final argument competition, opening argument, and there are several other different types of competitions that allow students to become involved in these activities in their first year. The actual tryouts for the teams are right at the end, during the summertime, at the beginning of the second year. Law review is pretty much the same. We do make a few exceptions at the end of the first year, but most of it is going to be the second year and on. But there are so many other activities. There are intramural activities across the curriculum. Everything from, you can take a yoga class to a cycling class to being involved in, just as Professor Minetti said, it's got to be about 50 different student activities here that you can do during your first year. And a lot of people also form study groups. And sometimes the section that you're in may have some section activities that you might be involved in also.
Before we get to study groups, because I do want to answer the question on study groups, but I also want to tell you that in addition to our organizations, in addition to our competition teams and our law review, we also have a variety of speakers. Almost every week you'll find 2 or 3 lunchtime speakers that can kind of spike your interest in different things that you might not have ever thought of. And of course, lunch is always served, so that's always a benefit for those of you that might be on a budget. All of you, or at least I am. So we all want to get the opportunity to see, you might not thought you had any interest in animal law whatsoever, but there's a great speaker on animal law, and that's something that really kind of makes you interested in something you didn't know about. So there's lots of opportunities to kind of taste the different kinds of law as you were moving through your first year. You mentioned study groups, and somebody's asked a question about study groups. What's your thought about study groups? Did you use study group in law school?
I did. And I think it has its pros and its cons. I think you have to find out what's right for you. I think that's the most important thing. I do recommend that you might want to try a study group to see if it's helpful for you. And you may not want to use a study group the entire semester. You may want to just do it right before exams. Like, each person will take practice exams and then get together and see if they came out with the same type of analysis on the questions. That's very helpful. The other thing is, it's nice to have a group of people if, for example, you're off one day, not taking as good notes, to see if there's another student there who can provide you with the information that you might have missed. Bouncing off the ideas that you learned in class is extremely helpful, and study groups can be important for that reason also. But it's not something that's mandatory, and some people feel that they may want to wait before they actually form a study group, or who's going to be in that study group. There are all those kinds of questions that you look at. But I would say I don't think it's like the atmosphere you might have read about in 1L in the study groups. That's not quite like that.
Right. What do you think, Professor Minetti? Study groups, not study groups?
I have to agree with Professor Podgore. I think it depends on the student. And I think, that leads to a larger conversation just about learning preferences. I think the slogan I often impart to first semester students is, don't ditch the date that brought you to the dance. You have been successful in previous educational experiences, or we wouldn't have admitted you. So think about how that happened. What strategies did you employ to help you become successful? Carry those strategies into the law school environment. And if working with others has been a way that you learn information best, then study groups may be right for you. And if that's not the case, they may not be the right thing. So I think it is quite variable. I will say that, if you're going to do a study group, I would keep it a professional group. Think about your colleagues as professional colleagues, and try to keep the personal sort of fellowship, or fellowship's not quite the right word, but social aspects of working with a group of law students separate and apart from what happens with a study group. A study group ought to be a group of maybe 3 to 5 students with an agenda, and it ought to be all about a potluck, not a buffet. And by that I mean every member of the study group has to commit to bringing something to the group, not just showing up and helping himself to what others have provided. The idea there being that you want the group really to be committed to helping each other advance along the journey through legal education, not to simply be about doling out information to a group of people. So think about a professional setting, a small group with an agenda, a time commitment that is really professionally driven.
Well, I'm going to take one more question before we close out today. Somebody has asked the question, do professors generally provide syllabus and kind of give me an idea of what they're going to expect from me as the semester goes forward? What has been your experience?
I don't know of any professor that does not provide a syllabus for their class. No matter whether it's trial advocacy, criminal law, first year, second year, a syllabus is a standard operating procedure here. So yes, I think you can be very much assured that you're going to get a syllabus for the course that you're taking.
Right. And I think you will learn, just as Professor Podger has pointed out several times, different professors look at syllabuses very differently. Some are going to give you a date and exactly what you're going to be expected, and they're totally organized, and every day they know exactly what they're going to do. Other professors are going to tell you, I'm going to tell you as we go along what's the next reading assignment. So you might not have a syllabus that actually lays out all of the reading assignments for the semester. So some are very specific, some are a little bit more general, but you're going to get something that kind of at least sets that expectation early on with regard to what the professor is going to expect of you. We're going to be, I think that you've noticed that this video will be available to you. It will be posted online, I think, at our YouTube channel on Monday or Tuesday, so that will be available to you. When we finish out here, we also will have a slide that will show you some email addresses. I think all of our email addresses will be on there, so if you have any questions specifically for any of us, please feel free to send us questions by way of email. I just want to give us each a chance to one last tip. If is there anything you would just want to tell the folks out there as they are thinking towards their first week of law school? Professor Minetti?
So, not to steal what Professor Podger said, but I think it is essential that you take a break, that you enjoy the summer, that you plan ahead for a rigorous fall, that you prepare your family, your loved ones, your friends for the experience that you're about to dive into. Consider taking a look at some of the books on the Academic Success webpage to get yourself acquainted with the program. But take a break and get some fresh air before you begin this program in the fall.
Professor Podgor?
I would echo the same thing that Professor Minetti has said, and I'd also tell you that I'm really looking forward to meeting all of you. I've had the opportunity to read many of your files this past time, and it's just an exciting group of students that are coming in, and I really look forward to seeing all of you in August.
And I would just like to finish up by saying this. Part of law school is attitude. Part of it is coming here with a real attitude that this can be a lot of fun. It can be rigorous, it can be frustrating, it can be stressful, but you know what? Sometimes just realizing that everybody else is kind of in the same boat as you are, and realizing that you can just take in so much and enjoy law school is just an incredible learning experience, can sometimes make it a little bit easier. We all are looking forward to seeing you in the fall semester and hope you have a great summer, and we'll hopefully see you next fall.
Thank you for watching Stetson Law Live. For more information, send us an email or give us a call. For your convenience, our contact information will remain on screen for the next few minutes. Be sure to check our homepage often for news, information, and updates. Thanks again. We look forward to hearing from you soon.